Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Facebook Live in the evening. We have Tommy with us tonight, who's going to be talking about the importance of seeing the person and not the dementia. And just as a little bit of an introduction, obviously, I'm Melanie from Dementia Carers Count, and I'm Dementia Carers Count acting CEO. And as some of you may know, we recently ran a poll on Facebook asking everyone if they had a time of day that they preferred us to run these sessions. And actually quite a lot of people would like to see us in an evening slot. So we're going to try and do that. And obviously, if you can't catch us then, hopefully you're going to watch us on our Facebook page or our YouTube account later. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Tommy Whitelaw, who has a lot more experience than me in being on screen in these type of events, but who was a carer for his mum who had vascular dementia. Welcome, Tommy. Thank you for joining us. And would you like to tell everyone that's watching a little bit about yourself and why you're here today with us?
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me along and for the kind introduction. My name is Tommy Whitelaw. I'm the National Lead for Caring and Outreach at the Health and Social Care Alliance Scotland. And I was also a full-time carer for my kind and beautiful mum, Joan, who lived with vascular dementia.
That's lovely. So if anyone has a question for Tommy or would like to comment on anything we're talking about, please do drop that into the chat. And our team is Ben today, and I'm relying on Ben to drop those into the chat for us to see, and then we'll read them out, and we'll try and answer as many of them as we can. And sometimes we answer them afterwards, because genuinely, just sometimes it's so busy we can't get to them all. But do try, and we're very happy for them to be anonymous too. So if you'd rather send us a private message through Facebook, we'll happily keep your question or your thought anonymous. And we'll look forward to seeing what you have to say. But now, as we've got such a lot we could cover with Tommy, between your personal experience and your role, I'd like to jump straight in if that's okay. Your mum had a diagnosis of vascular dementia, and I was just wondering when you first became aware of any changes.
So it took a little while. I worked in the music industry for 25 years, so I was not in Scotland. I was traveling around the world. It was part of my job, but I kind of noticed from a distance in phone calls and keeping in touch with my mum, but I didn't know what was different. I just knew. But it was then people started to get in touch with me, contact me to raise some of their concerns. I was actually coming back home for a little break for myself, coming back to Glasgow for a month or two for a break for me, but also thought, while I'm home for those 2 months, I'll find out about those concerns. And things felt different when I was back, and I didn't know what dementia was. And I certainly never knew who or what a carer was. So that 2 month break turned into 4 months, 6 months, 10 months a year, and then stayed at home for the next 5.5 years to try my best to care for my mum.
Yeah, so in the end, you became the sole carer for your mum. And how did that affect you? As you say, we don't always know we're a carer till we are one. And it'd be interesting to know how being a carer affected you, but also much more importantly, how was your relationship with your mum during that time?
So it affects you in many ways, emotionally, financially, physically. I kind of stumbled into caring for my mum and stumbled through it. You know, I didn't know what a carer was. For the first year of caring for my mum, I was trying to do my best to look after my mum a little bit. So we kind of stumbled into it and stumbled through it, and actually waiting for a while to get a diagnosis. Things just all took so long. So yeah, and over the years, absolutely it affects relationships. You know, this was the person who I came back to care for me all my life. You know, as I was traveling around the world, you know, and you find your own struggles, you run back home to your mum and dad because they make it better, don't they? And this was the first time where I had to maybe, although I was very grown up, but I had to grow up and recognise actually my mum needs a wee bit of help from me.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you're known for, Tommy, is really putting that huge importance on remembering someone for who they are and not for the condition that they have. And that whole piece about identity for the person living with dementia, but also for the people that are being identified as carers. And that comes up a lot when we're talking to people. And I really, you know, I know you've been so good at that in your work, and I'd love to talk to you a bit about how you make that work.
Well, I was writing a blog one night about when did my mum become invisible. You know, people speaking over my mum to me. When did that happen? How did we allow that to happen? What was the reason for it starting to happen? And I actually get more upset because I realised at that point we had both become invisible, and people were speaking over the both of us to each other, and it absolutely broke my heart. You know, because, you know, to be honest, I was crumbling inside, trying to, you know, how do we make it through today so we can make it through tomorrow, was the kind of space we were in. And that moment of realization that two human beings had become invisible to most people, you know, isolated from the lives we used to know, and on not just professionally but personally. So people who used to phone my mum suddenly stopped phoning, and people who used to drop in for a wee cup of tea stopped coming in for a cup of tea, and that really affected our opportunities and the space we had.
Yeah, I think we've already had a really meaningful comment in from Sarah, who says that her dad passed away in July and had been very sick since March, and she hasn't been to work since March. And then she found out in September that her mum's got vascular dementia, and she really feels like she should be home looking after her, but her husband and family think she should be at work, and so she's really worried about her mum, really wanting to be with her, and her, exactly as you've just said, she wants to give back what she had from her mum. So, you know, we're sending sympathy, Sarah, to you, but also, you know, check in with our team if you can. Hopefully we can put our 0800 number in, because balancing caring and working is tough, and having any misunderstanding of people not realizing how difficult that is, we'd really like to help with that if we can. And a second message now from Linda, who says that she felt invisible too. That's so true. And she's had carers, you know, paid carers coming in and talking over her mum, and she found that heartbreaking too. So I think that really resonates with people. Becoming invisible is definitely something that we want to help carers not be, and retaining our identity as well as the person with dementia's identity. And I think around this time, at some point, you started blogging, Tommy, and this helped you?
Well, it did, because I couldn't really leave the house, you know, and how do you, I didn't feel listened to. And I think, you know, when you're trying to kind of find a space to tell people how you feel inside, almost felt interrupted and unlistened to. So writing a blog, I felt I had a space where I could really share what it felt like inside, you know, the things that brought us love and hope and joy and opportunity, but also the things that left us feeling helpless and hopeless. So I just found it was a space where I wouldn't feel judged. I'd be able to tell people how I felt, how we felt inside. And it was almost a part of therapy for me. At night when my mum was asleep, I would write about those things.
No, that's really interesting. And in a sense, it helped you to process it, I suppose, but at your own pace, as you say, not interrupted, not talked over, just you and thinking about your mum and your memories.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a space to when you're alone and you're caring for someone and you don't see anybody for weeks and sometimes months at a time. Well, throughout the history of the world, sharing stories is what's created as a civilized human being. So that was my way of still being able to tell a story.
And at the same time, start thinking about what would improve life for both carers and people with dementia. I think in some of your work, you've talked about you know, heading for crisis without realizing it, and the phases of caring, because every day isn't the same. And perhaps you could, what we've identified this year with our carer survey is how many carers live in crisis. And I don't know whether is it too much to ask if you could talk a little bit about how you perceived crisis and any of the ways you coped during that time?
Well, firstly, it's a tragedy for every single human being that we allow to reach a crisis. we're failing people as a society. And a couple of things with crisis is when you're at a crisis, it's really difficult to tell people how you feel inside. It's also really difficult to listen to good advice. So we really have to be having conversations that, firstly, that it's okay to ask for help. That's the first message. It's absolutely okay to ask for help. But we have to be having these conversations much earlier in the process to support people. The problem is, like me and my mum, we're very private people at heart. You know, we like to keep our private issues to ourselves in many ways. But too often we meet people when they're reaching a crisis. And for us, it was the same. We stumbled just when we thought we were getting the hang of things. We'd wake up and dementia would change everything. So things we could do and achieve the day before, we could no longer do them. So you had to keep finding new starting points in life. The next problem around that was that when you reached that space, it took so long for help to get put in place that you were at the next space, and the help was actually not valid anymore because you could have used it 4 months ago, but it just kept taking so long. So in my mum's case, that's when you wake up one day and your mum's no longer able to walk or able to speak, or you know, and supporting my mum's personal care with my eyes closed. These are big defining moments that people need the right support at the right time at.
No, that's so important. And I think I think it's very right that you say that you are private people. We have a right to be private people, but sometimes we have to learn how to ask for help, and we want to, you know, make sure that our community advocates for people if they need support in that, because sometimes some people have managed to live quite happily privately for a very long time, and that's a big change in itself. And it doesn't mean you want to go off and do something in a jolly group, but you do want to be supported to live the life you've chosen, I think.
Well, the first film I made after my mum passed away is a little film called It's Okay to Ask for Help, where I kind of encouraged people to do that, and went out and met people speaking about their experiences of when they got a wee bit of help, the differences that made. So that was the first film I made a few months after my mum passed away. You know, I was, so lots of things I wish maybe I would have asked for help sooner. I wish I would have known where to ask for help, you know. So for me, there's two tragedies. The tragedy that when there's not enough support and services available. But the slide of that is when people don't know about it, when they haven't, nobody supported them to let them know where that help is. So that was, for me, was really important, was to try and encourage people that it's okay to ask.
No, I think that's such an important message, and one, you know, I'd like, you know, us all to think about, because it's about making us, you know, those of us that trying to support people, make ourselves available in the right way, and also recognizing that when people are in crisis, they can't absorb vast quantities of information. They need a bit of help and a little bit of breathing space to make decisions, so they can make their own decisions. I've got another couple of lovely notes here. One is from Ali, who says that she works in healthcare with residents who have dementia, and she finds it really rewarding when she can bring their past into the present day to help them with their memories. And again, that's a recognition by someone working with people that their identity is so important to them. So I'm glad that she finds that rewarding. I think Linda is also talking about some of her challenges. Her brother and her are splitting care of her mum for the last 6 years in her own house, and she's now 94, and she's lost the ability to walk, and being hoisted is very difficult to watch a strong mum that, you know, really your mum deteriorate in that way. And both she and her brother have given up jobs, but wouldn't have it any other way. But really pointing out the lack of support to carers to help them take care of their loved one is shocking. And lots of help in the first year of diagnosis, but it all stopping after that period. I'm just going to also read what Emma Jane says now, which is really that everything you say totally resonates with me. Her mum has both vascular dementia and Alzheimer's, and the ripple effects of dementia on the family can be horrific. And really thanking you for sharing your story. As you say, it's being private is one thing, but sharing the stories to empower others does give you a little bit of a sense that you're helping other people with some problems that you'd already experienced. And I think there's something that we've all picked up in our team, which is that you often talk about turning good intentions into purposeful actions. And I'd really like you to talk about some of those things that you're talking about there.
So I think as we look in health and social care, you know, people are working in these incredible professions and dedicating their lives to supporting others. But actually, we all do these things with good intentions. But we also know that turning them into actions can feel really difficult a lot of the time in the busyness of life, the busyness of care. So part of that, as I've been on this tour for the last 6 years, so I've did 17 talks this week.
Wow.
And just over 270,000 people have attended the talks. And along the way, we launched 30,000 What Matters to You stories, pledges, and trees. So asking people to really think about these 5 must-do areas. What matters to you and who matters to you? They're the key part. What kind of information do you need? So I'll be honest, I could have built a house out of flyers. Everybody I met wanted to hand me a flyer. What I wanted them to do was to listen to me for a little minute. I could have built 2 houses out of flyers. Nothing about me without me. So those 4 areas are the key, we think, the pathway to building flexible services. So we have to find ways of supporting people to turn those good intentions into an action and creating them a pathway. And that's what we've been working. In fact, we've just launched a publication last Wednesday at the Scottish Parliament, working with the Scottish Ambulance Service, Chest, Heart, Stroke Scotland, Social Security Scotland, Ayrshire and Arran, and 7 or 8 other partners about how we work together to help turn those good intentions that we have, those into an action. Because it can feel quite lonely when you want to make a difference. You can feel quite isolated. So we have to support people with pathways to do that.
That's phenomenal. I was thinking about those numbers, and I think I've been my colleague Rob has also mentioned that there's some real key stories about. I think he's telling me a really sad story about a bus journey you had, and that not going so well. You know, on the one hand, and I think there's a positive story that balances that out. It's really, you know, the day-to-day impact of this.
Yeah, so that's back when we were flirting as reaching yet another crisis, and me kind of feeling I have no clue what I'm doing today and I don't know how to do it. And took my mum by her hand to go to a health centre to try and get some help. And I kind of cried the whole way there on the bus, and I cried walking from the bus to the health centre and into the waiting area, and stood there holding my mum's hands in tears. And I said, I don't know, we really need some help. And I was told, well, you have to make an appointment. You can't just walk in here. The people behind you, they've all made appointments. And for me, the problem with that is that everybody in the bus could see we were struggling. Everybody walking to the building could see we were struggling, and everybody in the waiting room could see we were struggling. And we left there that day with less hope, less belief, less chance, less opportunity than we walked in. And I don't feel we should ever walk into a place that supports people with less chance and hope. We should always walk back out with more confidence, more listening. So that was one of many difficult moments that we personally faced, and came home that day and just really didn't know what to do. But, you know, the positives are when, on another occasion, I supported my mum's personal care. I used my mum's favourite shampoo every night and day so her hair would smell beautiful, because she'd used that shampoo for 40 years. Why should she suddenly have to not be able to use it again? So that's the shampoo she put in her shopping basket every week. But once again, and suddenly my mum had become incontinent, and I didn't know what to do, and tried to get some tips and advice. And I knew the person was coming out on the Thursday. And I thought, I'll help my mum, you know, I'll help my mum in the bath before she comes. I want my mum to be beautiful for the person coming through the door. But I also wanted them, when they leaned over to examine my mum, that they would smell the shampoo. Mm-hmm. And they would think to themselves, Joan Whitelaw, every time I'm ever beside you, then your hair must smell beautiful. Because that's what mattered to my mum. Those were the things that mattered. And as the person came to the door, I just burst out crying. And Yeah, and they just put my arm around my shoulder and just whispered that they thought I was doing a great job and of caring for my mum. And I have to be honest, my heart felt stronger the second the person said that. I remember thinking to myself, I think I can do this, I think I can keep doing it. And she showed me how to do this and showed me how to do that. And I'm going to help get you a bed that moves up and down, all these things. And then when she was leaving, she said the most important sentence. She said, I'm going to check in on you every Friday to make sure you're okay. And I think at that moment, suddenly the world didn't feel so lonely. I didn't feel so alone. We didn't feel so alone. So those moments of kindness, of listening, and often greatness is wasted when it's not handed over with kindness, We can meet many people with the same skill, the same knowledge, the same learning, the same job. But it all depends how we hand it over to the person we're standing next to. So these moments are really crucial and critical that support your confidence and remind us. So yeah, there's lots of stories, and I'm sure everyone listening will be able to share both good but it's really important we talk about the difficult experiences and the good ones, because we want to encourage more of the good ones. We want people to listen and think, I can do that. I would like to do that. That's how maybe I should try and support or encourage someone.
No, that's so true. And thank you for sharing those with us. Emma Jane says trying to get help is so very hard. And Ali, who I think is the professional carer, says that, she knows that loved ones can become very agitated and when they're diagnosed and they've got a dementia diagnosis, and she uses some distraction techniques to bring the past to the present moment so that they can talk about that and calm them down so you can continue to look after them without the agitation. And I've got a lovely message here from someone who I think you know, which is Lorraine Haining, our Lorraine Haining, who's saying that this is inspiring as usual, Tommy, and thanks for sharing your story and your journey, which is now making such a difference to so many others. And a little note here from Linda also saying that positive support is all we as carers are looking for. What I would like to say is to ask you is to tell people how they can follow your campaigning journey if they are on social media or Twitter. If you could let them know what your Twitter handle is, and perhaps we can get someone to put that into the chat as well. If you can just talk a little bit about how you campaign and what social media channels you use, so that people can perhaps get a bit more inspiration from you. And there are some great videos of Tommy to watch as well.
Yeah, so that's lovely. So on social media you can follow it Tommy N Tour. So it's Tommy, then N and Tour. There wasn't enough letters for Tommy on Tour. It was one letter too much. So it's Tommy N Tour. Or you can follow us at Alliance Carer Vaughan. I'll put them in the chat as well. I'll pop them into the chat just now. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, if you put them into our chat on here, and then Ben or one of our team will get them into the Facebook chat. So even if they're not there immediately, they will be. Yeah. And I'm just checking if there's a little bit more coming through. Oh, yeah, that's you. So hopefully one of our team can move those two Twitter handles into the chat. I think it would be really nice if you could finish our chat by talking about your mum as a person, not giving her identity as your mum and as herself. It would be really lovely to hear a little bit more about Joan, which is also my mum's name, so obviously that's why I haven't forgotten it.
I knew there was a twinkle in your eye, Melanie. I knew there was a twinkle in your eye. So I suppose I'll say the message that I finish all my talks with, if that's okay. That
please.
My mum's name was Joan Whitelaw. My mum was born on the 15th of July, 1939. Both my mum's parents died at different times while my mum was very young. And my mum's big sister, my Auntie Agnes, who was quite a bit older than my mum, who went on to have 8 children, she put her arms around my mum and she brought my mum up with her own children. And I think that was the building blocks that made my mum a remarkable lady. I feel so very lucky to be my mother's son. My mum knew what it felt like to be young and vulnerable and scared and alone, and how important it felt when someone said, but you're not alone. I'm your big sister and I care about you and I'm putting my arm around you. My mum then went out, you know, started and finished school and then went out to get her first ever job, actually as a trainee seamstress at the time. Then one evening at the famous Barrowlands Ballroom in Glasgow, my mum bumped into my dad, Thomas, who was my mum's only ever boyfriend, and my mum was my dad's only ever girlfriend. And when mum and dad were saving up to get married, they had very little money. And my mum spent 6 months making her own wedding dress with her own hands, and she looked absolutely beautiful in it. And my mum and dad gave their children everything and took nothing for themselves. And each person listening tonight will have their own love story to tell. But it's a really very quick description of my mum's life just now, isn't it? Anyone listening knows a tiny little bit about Joan Whitelaw. Actually, if you're listening just now, you now know more about my mum than most of the people who involved in her care or made decisions about her care in the last years of her life, because no one ever asked. No one really asked who my mum was and who she still wanted to be. And if we know nothing about people we're delivering care to, we can't possibly say we're caring for them. But when we take time to listen to the things that matter and who matters, and then what we're really doing is playing our part in someone else's love story. And just for anyone listening tonight, can I just thank you for every love story you've ever helped along the way, and for people who you've still to meet, whose love stories will benefit because of the kindness that you share.
That's really powerful. Thank you so much for making that very important point, Tommy. I mean, it's such it's a positive, a very poignant way to end our session. If I'm honest, I might have a tear in my eye, because it's that importance of understanding that every single person is different and they all have that story. I'm just going to quickly add that if there are any questions that you think of after the session, or if you watch it on catch up, pop the question in and we'll try and answer it. And we might badger Tommy if we need any more information from him. We'll have a look at those for you. We do have some more sessions coming up where you can meet our team and learn a little bit more. And I've just got one last message that I'm going to try and fit in because it's just squeezed into my chat. Which is from Bernadette, who says, thank you so much for this talk. Our mum's suffering from Alzheimer's and is currently in a care home looking towards long-term care. Not an ideal choice as she wants to come home. Totally unsafe for my sisters and I work full-time and unable to support her 24 hours. But now she's got decreasing mobility and coping skills. Moving forward is tough emotionally, mentally and financially. And thank you, Bernadette, for that. And thank you, Ali, saying that people need to, you know, take advice from the care home and support, and that carers need a bit of time for themselves. So really thank you everybody for contributing to this. Thank you so much for Tommy for fitting us in amongst the many other people that he's helped and talked to just today and of course across the week. Thank you so much for joining us both. And we look forward to seeing you again soon, and hope that this evening slot, which we're calling the evening session, Tommy and I, in homage to John Peel temporarily, our evening session with you has been lovely, and learned such a lot from you, Tommy, and it's all about people. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.